Welcome. You're listening to My Magical Horse, the podcast, where we are getting curious about animal communication. I am your host, Jordan Banks, and if you are desiring a more magical connection with your own horse, you are in the right place. Join us as we rediscover our sense of wonder, experience the joy, and feel the magic that horses can and do bring to our lives each and every day. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you for spending your time with us. Now let's get started. Welcome back to My Magical Horse, the podcast. Today, I am super excited to welcome world-renowned equine artist, Kim McElroy. Kim is actually local to me in Washington State, which is so crazy. And I followed her when I was in high school, and she was just getting her feet wet in the equine art world, and I was really truly enamored with your work, Kim. And today just feels like a pretty full circle moment that I get to interview you on my podcast. So welcome. Thank you for coming. And
Thank you.
just so excited to have you. Um,
It's
I
wonderful to meet you in person again and to remember special times that we don't recall specifically, but it's like that time in my life, where I'm kind of where you are now, perhaps, or it's just amazing.
Yeah, and Kim and I were talking right before we started the podcast, and I got, I was a recipient of a scholarship from the Washington Thoroughbred Breeders Association back when I was in high school. And they had subsequent like auctions to raise money for this scholarship fund. And so one year I actually did a portrait of Captain Kondo. And at that particular, I don't know what year that was, but at that particular year of that auction, I got to meet Kim at this thrust auction event. And yeah, little did I know that I would be interviewing you one day about your work, which is just so cool. But really, what drew me into just the idea to say, hey, do you want to do an interview is because the focus is animal communication. Um, it's funny because I really hadn't been thinking about your work in a while, like I was immersed in it when I was in high school, and then I found you on Facebook, but I still wasn't really thinking about the animal communication component until I saw you in that animal communication group with Kate. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I must reach out to you. And now here we are. But maybe we'll just start with a question like about animal communication, really. Do you feel like you're an animal communicator at all, or how do you incorporate that into your work? Like, at what level would you say you're at as far as being able to communicate with animals? And we'll go into all the details, but if
hmm
you just want to kind of even summarize how it came about or what it looked like to developing your intuitive gifts that you now infuse into your artwork, I would just love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many stories, and I don't guess I would consider myself an animal communicator in the sense of pulling up intuitive information, from a photograph immediately upon, you know, a client asking me that kind of thing. But the art is my medium, and I find it interesting that the word medium is for the type of art that you do.
I've thought
And of
about that
course,
too.
yeah, the
Yeah.
word medium of, a psychic medium, a
Hmm.
medium is someone who is between the worlds. And so I was introduced to animal communication early on when I first rescued my thoroughbred mare Dharma. And it's interesting, of course, that you and I met through, a horse racing venue, because in those days I was so new at all of that, and I was caught up in the celebrity of the racing world, and I did a lot of sketching and trips to the backside and meeting all these wealthy horse owners and that kind of thing. But anyway, from the standpoint of animal communication, I didn't even really know at that time what that was. I just knew from childhood that I had a kinship with horses that couldn't be explained. I just always wanted to be near them. And when I couldn't be near them, I was drawing them. And I couldn't be near them very often. So that was how I expressed my love for them, was through my art. And now I look back, it's usually in hindsight that we don't realize until, we start looking at child drawings that I did, there was always a shamanic presence of animals and mostly animals, but sometimes people, usually women, blended together, like half horse, half woman, or mythological creatures like dragons and unicorns blended with mermaids. And it was but they were like not just drawings, but they felt spiritual. They felt like they were kindred spirits, and that they had a purpose, and there was some kind of message behind it. And I didn't understand any of that, of course, at that time in high
Mhm.
school and such. I just knew, like I would blend an eagle's face. I'm thinking of something I did in high school. It was an eagle with a woman's face blended through, like you could just barely see the woman's face through the eagle's face. And that evolved into what I started to do in the 90s, which was the Horses and the Elements series that you mentioned, that you're so enamored with. And so that all was in me, like from birth, it just came through. And fortunately, I was really supported in my life with my parents. They were both into metaphysics, and especially
Oh,
my mom. So there was never any judgment around that, or any kind of limitation to what you could believe or understand. And you created your own reality in our sort of family model. So it was never a doubt that you could feel or sense things, and equally that art was a way of doing that, and that art had a purpose and a path. And it was never restricted to, you have to go become a secretary or a lawyer or whatever you want to earn a living, kind of thing.
right.
Yeah. So that was all the kind of the big picture. From the smaller, not smaller, but I guess more specific picture, I would say that it was really my horses who led me to the concept of animal communication. Like I didn't really know what that was until I adopted this ex-racehorse who was just completely new to me. I was such a novice. I had no way of understanding how to even handle her, because she came with a lot of baggage from the racetrack, and her beautiful the beautiful connection we had when we met, that was like a love story. I called it love at first breath, where I met
Mhm.
her at the backside of the track, and she was so sweet and so kind. Looking at her immediately in her stall, there was just already a bond. And she lifted her head up and breathed in my face, as horses greet each other. And whiffled my hair with her nose, and I just started crying. I just knew she was my soulmate. And then it was like, how can I? She's a racehorse, how do I do this? And then, fast forward a year later, when I actually was able to acquire her through a series of events,
Oh,
where she
wow.
was injured and couldn't
Mm.
race anymore. She was already injured when I met her. And but bringing her all the way out here from Kentucky and learning how to do all that, much less than how to handle an ex-racehorse who was post-traumatic and afraid of, leaving her stall, and afraid of other horses, and didn't know what to do with herself in a arena. If you let her loose, she would just kind of be like, I don't know how to play or have freedom. I don't know what I'm doing. What's my job? So
Right.
that became the question. And then actually my sister lived in Mount Shasta, California. She had a bookstore, metaphysical
Oh,
and
cool.
popular bookstore there. And she knew a one woman who was an animal communicator named Sharon Callahan. And Sharon, I called her, and her first question basically was, well, I believe in addition to animals having, emotional and physical issues, and perhaps metaphysical ones, but also they reflect, the challenges of the people in their lives. So a question to ask is, do you have any challenges in your life that she might be mirroring? And that this was in, gosh, it would have been 97 or something. So this was she was one of the first animal communicators I'd ever even heard of. I had been very, sort of brought up with the concept of mediums and psychics and even channelers, but I'd never really specifically connected with the idea of animal communication. And of course, now it's just like made perfect sense, and now it's much more widely accepted than it was then. But back then, it was like rocket science. It was like, wow. And so that was the beginning of even the concept. And then learning it myself was something I didn't even occur to me. But then what happened was that through all of my art, I began discovering that people reacted to my art as if it was a living horse. They would stand in front of it and often be moved to emotions or feelings or thoughts that they never expected, that didn't necessarily have to do with the horse in the painting or even the composition. It had something to do with their own life story and their own heart and past or present. And that became like it informed me that there was something more going on, that there was a spiritual essence to my work. And through that time is when I had a just an encounter at a psychic fair with a shamanic teacher, and in a room full of 200 people, did a shamanic journey, thinking, well, this will be really interesting. I'll probably just see something because I'm making it up, and I'm not going to pick a horse as my totem because that would just be too obvious. So I'm just going to, please, universe, just send me something that's really clear, like this is your totem, that isn't just something you love, right?
For
and
sure.
right, the drumming took me right into that visionary space without any effort, and I saw a white-winged horse. But even though it was a horse, I knew it wasn't something I was making up. Like, it was very clear that there was a difference between imagining something and having a vision of something. And that's where it all began, was learning, okay, how do I have a conversation? How do I understand what this message means, and who is this horse, and what does he have to do with my present, past, and future?
So who was the horse? Do you know?
Yeah, so you actually pulled up a card
Oh, I
as we were
did.
sitting down. So it's
This one.
apparent that he's joining us in this reading, right?
He
So he's
oh. Well, I
called the
pulled
messenger.
it caught my eye because this whole thing with my magical horse is because my horse Ugo is my Pegasus. So
Right.
this one definitely caught my eye.
It's a
So this was the
beautiful white horse with, but non-traditional Pegasus. So the
Mhm.
wings are they're more like energy wings.
Mhm.
He's in this, surrounded by purple, and his wings are purple as he's running directly towards you, like he has a message for you. And the wings are really more born of light and air. They're just they're not feathered wings. They're just energy wings.
And that's the vision that you saw
Yeah,
in
and
the
I
the
later
shamanic.
learned that I also saw and often see like a crystal cave that
Mm.
I find is like the place where we meet. And in shamanic traditions it would be called the lower world. And the the I needed some help with the interpretation, but I consulted with some psychic at the time, and she and I did some other shamanic training and journeys, and it became apparent that he had actually he is still, I'm sure, a guardian, like an angelic being in the heavenly realms, who would greet people on the other side that were for whatever reason unable to connect with a human angel or guide, and they would seek out him as the horse, which was such an epiphany for me, because it was like, of course that's what I do with my art. And the magical part of it especially was that he invited to me to be one with him for a time. So I literally like became part of him, stepped into his form in that realm, and began to experience his guidance for the people and their wish to connect with him as a horse. And that, I mean, that was just like my life's path right there. Like, the horse is the messenger for my healing message, for the horse's healing message, for the universe's healing message to come through to whatever individual needs that information.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Speaking of, I'm gonna jump around because I have so many questions, but when you were talking about the cave, it just that jarred my memory because I've been on this deep healing journey for the past 2.5 years now, and I had never done any type of journey or whatever. And I was working with Amber Leidick and Shaylee Evans,
Mm-hmm.
and Amber led us into what she calls the cave meditation. And the painting behind you with the looks like almost like the aurora with the horses
Mm-hmm.
in it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't see horses in my aurora, but when I was in the cave, there was the aurora borealis was there like shining through this hole in my cave, and my horses were there, of course, too. And
Wow.
anyway, that painting is just mesmerizing, really. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's the cover of the Council of Horses Oracle deck, which we'll talk about. So that
Let's
is called Concilium Equorum, which is Latin for the Council of Horses.
And I do have your deck here, and I do have questions about
Yay.
this.
Yeah.
Um, so what is the Council of the Horses, and how did you meet them? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah. So fast forward, many, many years, as I developed my intuition and began experiencing horse assisted healing practices with Linda Kohanoff, and co-wrote a guide deck with her, The Way of the Horse. I'm sorry, I didn't
Oh,
co-write, I illustrated,
oh yeah, I have that one too.
co-created.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that
And
one.
that came out in 2007. And that was when I began learning how to connect with the horse consciousness, with a horse present. I guess you could say that's animal communication. It's just, I never really framed it that way because it was all more personal. It was like my own messages. It wasn't
Mm.
necessarily for, someone else, but it still was a form of animal communication. I think actually, I'm glad I reframed that because it was the first time I really had the sense that I could stand in front of a horse, ask a question of myself and the horse about my life or what I was experiencing somatically in my body. And it's what Linda would call the body scan, during a session, an intuitive session with the horse. And there's intuitive levels, there's physical levels, it's all blended, but basically there's a communication and a dialogue going on. And I began receiving images and interpretations of information for myself that went far beyond anything I'd ever done before in like a therapy session. They were intuitive messages. And I could interpret them because they were my own. They had their own
Mm.
language. I understood what they meant, even if they were abstract.
Mm-hmm.
So then fast forward to around, must have been around 2011 or so. I was actually, I'd met Linda Kohanoff at the ranch, at the property and beautiful center of a woman named Sandra Wallin, who has Chiron's Way in Canada. And she's one of Linda's approved instructors. So Linda hosted a workshop there. And that's actually how Linda and I met in person,
Mm.
though there's, all these stories ties together. My Sharon Callahan, the animal communicator, connected me with Linda Kohanoff back when she was writing the Tao of Equus, because she
Right.
used the story about Dharma to connect the idea that humans and horses reflect each other's issues. And Linda
That's
was
so
really,
cool. Oh
that's
my
what her
gosh.
whole book was about. So she called me
Wow.
and said, I'd like to share the story about Dharma. And we got connected that way. So a few years later,
Wow. What a
I
small
know
world,
it's all
really,
meant to
right?
be. Yeah, we think we have ideas, and then we find out no, it's actually been pre-planned, and you have free will, but your horse is going to lead you.
Yeah.
And so Dharma led me to all of these things, as it turns out. And so I met Sandra at that time, and later she and I started doing workshops together, teaching co-creating workshops, usually around art and horses. And during that time, I did a shamanic journey with in mind, where is the work in the world supposed to go, and what am I supposed to be doing? And I had this glimpse. It's usually just a glimpse, and then I later try to go, what was that? But the glimpse was, I have a guide I has become known to me through many visions. His name is Akashkua. He's in the Council of Horses deck as well. And my understanding about him is that he holds the Akashic records for horses, which
Oh.
was really incredible even to think about or conceive of. But that was the name he gave me, and that's how I realized that was what he held, because a linguist began explaining to me, it's like you find these bits, breadcrumbs and puzzle pieces, and you try to put together, what does this mean? What does this mean? Because it's all when you're asking big questions, you get big answers, right? So
Yeah.
then you have to kind of break it down, like, what does this mean in the actual world? If I'm not versed in Akashic records, what does that mean? So anyway, I Akashkua appeared and led me to a clearing in a forest, and the first horse that stepped into the clearing was Red Bear, who's the horse behind me.
Mm.
And Red Bear's in the deck as well. And I mean, I even at the time I was like, Red Bear, what an interesting name for a horse. Why is he called Red Bear instead of Red Horse? And that kind of thing. But he was the guide to the forest and the hibernation and the rest and the rejuvenation of your energy, so that you can, find the answers that you seek. And he led me into the woods, and in another clearing, there was the presence of horses in a council, like a circle of horses. And I came out of the vision with so much excitement. I was like, there's something here. What does this mean? And then quickly we both were, guided to think, wow, this could be another card deck. So that was early days. We continued teaching and doing our work. And then over the years, the ideas started to form. So it actually was a long process of evolving from that concept to what could it be, how could it manifest, how could we find a publisher, and all of that. So it just was released in October. So I'm really, really happy to have it in the tangible world.
Yeah, I was curious because I mean, can you explain to anybody who isn't familiar with Oracle decks what they are? Because I know I
Sure.
previously, 2 years ago, would not have known what to even do with this. But now I'm like mesmerized by these cards. And yeah, how long did you do so did you do painting specifically for this deck then?
I did, yes.
How long
That
did
was
that
quite a
take?
project. Yeah, so I did over 20 paintings in 1 year for
Wow.
the card deck, which is something I've never and would prefer to never have to do again. Even though it was a very inspired time, it was also a very challenging time, and I was also going through a lot of critical health issues with my horses, so it was quite intense. And
Mhm.
co-writing the book as well. So we were just in the throes of the creative project, and but our wonderful publisher gave us as much time as they could, and we had done a lot of work in preparation for that. So there was there was some essays already written and that sort of thing, and I had done a few paintings in preparation, hoping that we could find a publisher.
Mhm.
But the as far as an oracle deck, what it is, the publisher really chose the word oracle because they wanted to heighten the sort of spiritual aspects of It's not oracular, I would say, in the sense of, it's not about predicting the future, because horses, as all guides would say, there's the future is yet to be determined, and there's multiple ways in which that might unfold. It's not about a prediction as much as it is finding the heart of the matter and what are the questions to be asked as you travel this path. And the cards offer guidance so that you can either choose a card that speaks to you because the horse image is drawing you to it, or you look randomly in the book because you find a name that sticks out or whatever. And this is a practice that's gone back in time. In fact, even biblical, like people will open a Bible to a certain page. I love the series Cadfile that was about these monks in, you know, like the 1400s or whatever, and even to like in a trial they would open a Bible and you know use the phrase that their finger landed on or whatever they used to mark it. It was so astonishing. I was like, wow, look at that, you know. And but equally fascinating, or more so to me, is that discovered that there is something called the art of hippomancy, which is the art of divination through horses that happened probably in Grecian times,
Oh,
and it was used for battle strategies and crop cycles, and they would literally put sticks on the ground and as horses walked over them in whatever pattern or refused to walk over them or whatever they did would determine, you know, the outcome of the question. So that just was so exciting because it's just proves that how long our cultures have been involved with the horse, how long we have considered them to be sentient and guided beings that are from the divine and are intermediaries of the divine. And so that was a perfect segue into this oracle deck.
wow. Yeah. So it says there's 40 cards, and so you said you did 20 paintings in a year. So then the other 20 were those pulled from other work you've already done, or how did
Yes, there was there I think there's about 20. I haven't counted exactly. I think there's 24 maybe that are new works and then others that were from previous pieces. Uh-huh.
Okay,
And
how
then
did you
actually Sandra Wallin also contributed a couple of paintings and we collaborated on a third. So
Oh, okay.
that was a fun artistic challenge too. So so you started to say.
Oh, so just how did you decide the other paintings that were already pre-done? Like, how did you guys choose what you were going to pull into the deck?
Right. Yeah. Every decision we thought we were going to make about the deck and that we planned for years that we were going to do this, this, and this, you know, it was like we had to constantly rearrange because everything was in a state of flux, which is really how horses are, right? There's, you know, you go with the flow, and when the flow shifts, you go with that flow, and that's the way the deck was. It was definitely in co-creation with the horses, and we were guided in so many ways by what you know what came to us when we had visionary meditations or shamanic journeys, or in our writing where something would go a certain way. And Sandra had certain concepts she wanted to write about, and I had certain concepts I wanted to write about. So some of the cards were became a way, a vehicle to express those thoughts, but they were definitely in conjunction with the horse as the co-creator, as the guide. And so it was less about horses as it was with horses and their guidance. And what was most inspiring was the messages and the visions that we both had around these beings, which we wanted to celebrate from the beginning. We wanted to really celebrate the archetypal energies of horses throughout human culture because there's been so many incredible beings that are considered divine, or you know, that tie into our mythologies and our amazing archetypes of horses in different cultures. But also we began discovering that there were beings that, like the messenger, for instance, that the messenger is not Pegasus. People sort of associate him with Pegasus, and he has those properties, but he's also his own kind of myth, you might say. And myth doesn't mean made up, it doesn't mean man-made. Myth is an archetypal energy that I believe is, you know, connects with a divine energy that is just a way of condensing that energy so you can define it and ask it to dialogue with you about life questions. And so my work has always been about that. So it was really quite uh, meaningful to choose images that represented certain qualities, like the storyteller. Uh, you know, there's a backstory to the storyteller that doesn't always get told, but But the card represented that energy, and that was really beautiful.
Some of the archetypes that you included, can you tell people a little bit about those if they're not familiar?
Sure. So there are many there are way more mythical creatures than we could possibly have featured, and would love to do in future events, and encourage those horses to come forward. But for instance, the unicorn is a classical creature that is well known. But in this deck, and I can show it, it's hard to read these
Oh yeah.
with the shine, but I'll show it there. So this unicorn he's almost transparent. He's actually, I always feel like unicorns are from another realm, and they appear or disappear at will. So they have a presence, but they also are very elusive, and they're like in between worlds. And this unicorn wasn't his message for us wasn't about simply, beauty and innocence. In fact, it was about sort of the woundedness of innocence, the
Mm.
about betrayal and forgiveness, and deeper conversations like that. Because the history of the unicorn in man's world has been very, very, difficult, and the reason they disappear is because they were hunted. And I mean, the unicorn in the earliest texts in the 11th century, early, whenever those travelers and explorers were going to different cultures, they literally saw unicorns and documented these beings throughout history. So it was
Wow.
considered a living being.
I
And
didn't even
the
realize that, I guess.
yeah,
Fascinating.
and the unicorn horn was actually sold in pharmacies as a curative, because they were known to detect the presence of poison. And
Oh,
so
wow.
they could nullify any poison or toxicity. So they would have cups made out of what they considered unicorn horn, and they would sell for high prices, or it would be ground up and put into a medicine. So
Wow.
the unicorn having its horn cut off was a betrayal of the ultimate kind, and they're even featured in the Bible. So they're known throughout history.
Wow.
There's also, of course, Pegasus, and there is, let's see, the also living beings. Our deck isn't just depicting, mythological beings that you might consider were human cultures. There were the living beings of our own horses that shared our lives and do share our lives, and also, for instance, Eohippus, which is the earliest form of horse in our paleontology history.
Hmm.
52 million years ago was the creature Eohippus, which is called the dawn horse. And they lived long before, the equus form of the horse that we know now. But I've always found it very, very fascinating to think of this small creature who was about the size of a cat, that was the earliest evolution of the horse. That, the one of the things we wrote in the card is that, you know big things come from small beginnings. Because every branch of that evolutionary path could have died off and never created the horse. And so it's about crossroads, and making decisions, and
Wow. That's
finding
cool.
the path that will thrive.
Yeah, she's showing a picture of the card for people that are just
Thank
listening.
you. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a little Eohippus, like blended with the body of a big horse, with branches of the evolutionary trail of the evolution of Eohippus to horse to Equus. There's also Longma, which is an amazing creature from China. It's a dragon horse with deer antlers and a red mane,
Oh, wow.
and they are known to appear only when good and kind leaders are in power. And
Wow.
they have such an amazing history in their culture, and they walk on water. They carry the I Ching, which is another divinatory tool. So there's some amazing history with horse kind, and then also our own horses in our fields and have carried us to war, and were the beings that helped us settle the world, and so they have been of great service to us and continue to offer such wisdom.
Wow. This is just so fascinating. And how many works of art have you made or created in your lifetime? Because I'm like, wow, you have so many paintings. Or they're pastels, really, right? That's
Pastels, yeah,
yeah.
pastel is a dry medium, but I do call them paintings. And I actually just about a month ago, I finally counted because, I have lists and tried to figure it all out. And at that time, I was delighted because the number was very magical. It was 444 is what I could
Wow.
actually put the number to.
Wow.
And I actually, when I divide that by the almost 40 years I've been doing it, I thought, well, actually, I've not been as prolific as I think I'd like to be. But every painting I put so much into that each one takes me about a month. So
Mm.
that's why it was such an uncanny request, to do that many paintings in a year, because it was a big ask, and I'm so committed to every painting being the ultimate that it can be. I Even when I do what I call my spirit sketches that are more elusive,
Mm.
ethereal drawings, that might just take a few hours but have a big impact. I kept telling myself if I would just do the whole deck like that, I could have done it in a fraction of the time. But when it comes to painting Pegasus, I just want to paint every feather. I just
Right?
can't resist.
No, it's awesome. I don't know, about a year ago or so, I actually had someone ask me if I would like co-create an oracle deck with them, and I said no because I was like I don't have time to do that many drawings. Like I don't think the person realized how long it would take for me to create this.
Right.
And it's not that I wouldn't want to do it, but I'm just like I just know that I don't feasibly have the time to do that right now. Maybe
Yeah.
some point in the future I can do something cool like that, but yeah, I'm fascinated. And the other deck, the Way of the Horse deck, um that one came out, would you say in 2007?
Originally, it was 2007. This is the reprint that was done in 2022. We were so
Oh.
grateful that another publisher was willing to take it up, and
Oh.
but it has been in print all that time, and now this new revised deck has a couple of new cards.
And
So
those are
Linda,
all your paintings also?
yes, yes, that was so fun because it was actually, I did 6 new paintings for that deck, because most of my work at that time, we were fortunate, we had limited time to create it, and Linda found the concepts that she wanted to write about the in my art that was existing already.
Oh,
So it
okay.
worked out really more, it was a bit easier for me. The but the fact that she could see the concepts and interpret what she wanted to write about emotional, deep emotional concepts and emotional wisdom was really amazing, because that's where really how it evolved, was the idea that each of these works of art is not just a portrait of a horse or just a picture of, the idea of horses in waves or whatever. Like the one you pulled earlier was
Hmm.
called Eye of the Storm, and it's a horse,
Love
it's
it.
7 horses in a wave that they're not actually, they don't look like horses, they look like the wave. And then when the more you look at it, you go, oh, is that a horse? Oh, there's another one, and you find out there's 7 horses with the Eye of the Storm in the center. and
This
and
is one of my, I love this so much.
yeah, thank you.
One of my all-time favorites.
It was such an inspiration, that whole series, because I began seeing horses in waves early on in my career. And again, I didn't know at that time that there was a Greek myth that Poseidon created the first horse. So the god of the sea created horses in Greek mythology. And I ran into that information after I had been painting horses for several years in waves. So
Wow,
that
that's
was,
amazing.
it's like I came in with this information and then I had to decipher it all. But of course, the horse there's so many reasons why the horse would emulate the wave, not only in their amazing power and their flow and their spontaneity and their connection to nature, but also they came from the sea in many cultures, like the Spaniards bringing horses to America, or Grecian villages, finding that people were coming on the beaches and coming to conquer their city or whatever. So there was the presence of horse in the ocean was always a thing, and also that evolved into phrases that we use that we're not even thinking about, like and then clouds too, mare's tails.
Mm.
There's I actually met a windsurfer once who looked at one of my paintings of horses in the waves, and he said, "Oh my God, I didn't ever really think about the fact that, but surfers call that mare's heads. That kind of wave is called mare's heads." But he said,
Really?
"I didn't ever stop and look and go, oh, there's horses in there."
Wow, that's so
So
cool. And
they
you were
they
already making these paintings.
yeah, it was just like all came together. And so for instance, for the Way of the Horse deck, that eye of the storm comes into a concept of, being the eye of the storm when things are in a tumultuous way around you, how to ground and center in the twirl of emotions and that kind of thing. So everything's metaphoric in art, and especially art with horses. So it all comes together with a beautiful interpretation.
Yeah, I think that when you were doing that series, would you say Horses in the Elements? Or
Hmm.
when you were doing that series, how many paintings are in that, or how many are in that series?
I would say, well, probably about 20 at least, but it weaves into the work I do even now, because
Mm.
what what I often am doing now with my portrait work has been evolving into, when I create portraits of horses that are crossed over, um, oftentimes I'm seeing images in my shamanic journeys where they are blended with some form of nature, like a mountain or
Mm.
a wave or a cloud, where they're like they are the mountain, they are part of nature, and now their spirit is one with this place or this tree or whatever it is. And that gives us a tangible and intangible way to connect with them.
So when you do those portraits for people of horses, well, horses that have passed or even horses that are still alive, is that part of your process then to do a shamanic journey, or what does that look like when you take on a commission, if you want to talk me through that?
Yeah, so it really, because I was familiar with that experience of shamanic journey, I did some training in that, and it came naturally to me. So it was sort of my own blend of what I do and what I was taught. And I mean, the shamanic process is really the drumming allows your conscious mind to have something to focus on, and it's also rhythmical and steady, and so you can kind of get into a subconscious state very quickly.
Mm.
And it pretty much happens for everyone. Like whenever I've taken a class with other people that are new to it, there's very few people that don't experience something, even with the first experience. And those that don't still have, beautiful benefits, and then they can tap into it over time. But it did happen very quickly for me, and I began, out of curiosity, in part, to try to examine how could I use this kind of intuition with my art. And then when I began doing commissioned work, because my early work was really, you know, drawing works of art that were conceptual, broad, um, broad meaning for a wide group of people, like the horses and the waves, or horses and eagles combined, and that kind of thing. And then as I achieved some fame, more and more people, wanted to have me paint their horses, and that was a beautiful challenge and a responsibility, because I wanted to not only depict the beauty of a horse for someone as their friend and companion, but also my belief system is that these horses and these beings and all my animals have been in my life for as spirit guides and companions on a deeper level, as a soul companion. So I wanted to really attract people who believed in that, and I wanted to, that's what I wanted to paint. That's the stories that I wanted to tell. And so but as it is, you know, the universe provides the opportunities for that to unfold. So one of the biggest experiences that led to my awareness that I had an intuitive side of that, of my work, was when I was commissioned to paint a painting for a horse. It's called Hoofbeats in Heaven. And
Hmm.
it's a painting, it was a painting for a group of people who were, they had in the early days of the internet, they had a website this one woman had created, for people to light a candle for their horse and tell their horse's story. And the light a candle was like a little, you know, icon for the candle burning. And it was really sweet and beautiful and meaningful. And those people, out of the hundreds of people that had signed up for that website, there was a small group of about 10 people, I guess, that had very, you know, felt really kindred spirits and kept in touch on a personal level. And so they decided they wanted to commission me to do a group portrait, which in and of itself was really fascinating idea, because I was like, how do you share a portrait, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so it worked out really beautifully. What I came up with was, well, the woman who originated the website, they all, you know, she was the one who brought them all together. So they wanted her to have the original art, and two of her horses were in it. And I ended up doing, I think it's 11 horses in the painting, which was a lot because working in pastel, I can only do things so small. And so each horse had to be about 6 inches tall, was about the smallest I could get them in one big painting. And so I began doing shamanic journeys for each of these horses, and not knowing anything about them, I just asked them, you know, who are you and what do you have a message? And first of all, it I had always, you know, I believe in the soul continuing and the afterlife and whatever that means, for everyone. But you know, there's a horse heaven, and there's, you know, a spirit realm where horses reside, and that we can be there with them, and there's no limitation to horse, human, animal, you know. And what was amazing was that it did seem in my mind's eye, when I would see these visions, which come to me as, usually I would say a picture, a moving picture, usually, in snippets. And but it's also somatic, like I feel it in my body. I feel a sense of knowing, and I often will, as I'm traveling throughout the realm, um, it's like I'm moving through space. I feel kinesthetically, you know, that there is a change of vibration, or whatever you might call that, a change, like it goes along with my visual if I'm going somewhere, but it also feels like a different place in my body. And each one of these horses, I began receiving brief, usually just one or two messages from them or from the group as a whole. And one of the things I remember most vividly as a whole was really a beautiful thought, which was, I asked, I found that there was an apple in my hand, and I was giving it to one of the horses. And I thought to myself and said to the horse, uh, well, you're in heaven. You can have apples anytime you want. And the feeling, the message again, that came back to me was, oh, but they're better when they come from human hands. And
Oh.
it was so beautiful. It was like, wow, you know, and it really fed my fascination with, I've always been fascinated by, you know, why are these beings helping us? Why are they in our lives? And why are they willing to, when they go through so much suffering, really, in order to, for us to become enlightened enough to really understand them? And even the best of us, you know, run into situations where we wish we could do things differently or knew things better or whatever. But they're so forgiving, and they're so full of love, that there's never any limitation to their willingness to be co-creating with us. So it was really an epiphany. And what was exciting for me as, you know, as an intuitive was that I was getting confirmation from these people. These were the first time I'd really shared with people that I could do this.
Mm.
And people were saying, you know, like one horse image impression I got was something about the symbol was a musical symbol, and the client, when I rode her, she said, "Oh my gosh, I used to sing to my horse every time we rode, you know, we went riding." So that kind
Wow.
of confirmation was just really took me to another level of trust in what I was doing. And then later on I began incorporating those symbolic imagery into the art itself. So um, but one of the most profound messages from a horse in that experience was one of the horses was the owner of the website. Her It was her father's horse, so that horse had passed many, like 20 years before, and she said, "I'd like to include him in this portrait." And I started doing the drawing, and I painted about like his head and shoulders, and I went, "Oh, I forgot to do the journey with him." So I said, you know, I like went into meditation and did a shamanic journey, asking to connect with him. And now I know that it's all the same. Like doing the art is the shamanic journey.
Mm.
But back then, you know, I was like, "Oh, I gotta, you know, do it the right way, in the right order." And so, but what was fascinating was it was a huge lesson for me, because in the journey, when I encountered him, it was also, there was an experience of there, wherever we were, there had been like a fire, and I was picking up, with my hands, I was picking up charcoal from the earth,
Oh, wow.
and rocks that had pigment in them, and I was somehow connecting. I later realized that it was like, that's the material I'm working with, you know, charcoal, pastel, it's all pigment, it's all earth's pigments. And
Wow.
then when I was in this sort of almost desolate place, and I said, you know, "Where is this horse?" And then I saw him, and he was appeared to me as if the what I had seen in my drawing, I had, like, he was only head and shoulders. And I said, "Why are you showing me what I've drawn of you?" And the feeling again was, he said, "I have had forgotten my horse self. I've been here for so long. I hadn't differentiated myself for some time. And your drawing, I'm still getting chills every time I tell this story, that your drawing is helping me remember my horse self."
Oh, wow.
And oh my gosh, I mean, what an honor, and what a beautiful way to define for me what spirit is and what he experienced. And you know, it was just profound. So that was just the beginning of what has been an amazing journey with horse spirits, through time and space.
I'm fascinated that I stumbled across you at the time that I did, because I've been on my own journey and my horses have really become my guides, and it's so much beyond, riding them or whatever I used to think was the end game. It's like, no, they are here for something. Like Ugo, the first time I connected with him was like 2.5 years ago with Shaylee at this clinic that I went to. And he basically said he's here for so much more. He's here for so much more than what did he say? He thanked me for seeing him for who he is and not feeling like I have to make him perform, and that he's here for so much. What he's here for is so much deeper than that. And it was just, I mean, we have just been on this journey since then of where I don't even care if I ever ride my horses again. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love to ride them, but the essence of how they're guiding me on my own journey, just like you're being guided on your journey, is something that I don't even know if you can put words to it. It's so profound, and it's so moving, I think, from a soul level when you realize that it's not just you, and that they, yeah, like you said, they're co-creating with us this, I don't know, it's just,
This reality. Yeah, it's co-creating reality. And as you were speaking, I was thinking it's really like, even though I can only I have to admit I can only sort of imagine what people experience with riding, because I've only once really had that incredible, beautiful trust space where I felt one with a horse. And people have that more often with their own horses, and their
Mhm.
experiences with that, what they're seeking with that, and power and all of those amazing things. But I think that when we begin looking through the lens of co-creating and energetic connection and communication, we're really, it's like that's really what we were seeking, some of us.
Yeah.
And that this riding of the co-creation, that becoming one is the metaphor of
Mhm.
what actually is possible. But it's a less physical perhaps, but it's equally profound.
Yeah, and maybe too is just the whole part of the process. Like we're right now in this deep, really kind of immersing ourselves into the, oh, there's a whole nother plan besides, oh, we're gonna go to dressage shows,
Right.
or whatever. But but that, yeah, I mean, I guess when if I don't even know how to word this. If I'm riding my horses now from the place that we're at now on a spiritual level, it may
Right.
be even that much more profound than it ever was before, I guess
Hmm.
is kind of what I'm trying
Absolutely.
to say. But
Yeah.
do you gosh, I have so many questions. Kind of go backwards just a little bit. You said you started drawing, did I read when you were 12? Is that what I read on your website,
Oh,
or
from
earlier?
birth. I mean,
From birth, from birth.
as I
Okay.
say, from, as soon as I could hold a crayon. And I'm
Oh yeah, that
fortunate that
is what
my
it
mom
said.
was really wonderful and believed in me from the start. I was her firstborn child. And so she doted on me, I think, and saw everything I did as artistic talent even before I exhibited artistic talent. So I have my earliest drawings, and I love this one that it's just a scribble, but it's a green horse with a little tiny child holding grass.
Oh
And it's like you
wow.
can differentiate enough to see that. And yeah, so that was always in me,
And
horses and
did
art.
you do so what did your like did you, are you just like self-taught, or did you go to school for this? I guess that's another question I have.
Both, I would say. Yeah, I was, because as I mentioned, my parents were open to the idea of my skill level and could see that I had talent. Even at a young age, I think my first probably formal art lesson was maybe around 8 years old.
Oh, okay.
But of course, I had art in school like other kids. But and my grandmother was a professional artist, interestingly. So
Oh.
when I was able to take lessons from her, that was another layer of learning. She painted an oil painting medium, and so I experimented with that, and I was always drawing. It was just part of who I was. And then when so I lived in Southern California, grew up there, and when my parents divorced, my mom and I moved to the Northwest, and it was perfect timing because even though the high school up here didn't really have as much of an art program as I had hoped. Actually, let me back up a little bit. So when I was in California, my mom supported me, my parents supported me in the idea of going to there was an accelerated art program that was offered as that in another high school where I was bused. Like they were taking students that were accelerated in the arts, whether they were and sciences. So you could be a math, aficionado, um, or an artist or whatever. And so I got to experience art teaching at the level of like a senior or college student rather than just a sophomore or freshman where I was. So that was really, really helpful and influential for me. And then and to be considered, like to go to another art program and to be considered talented enough to have won this scholarship, like you won a
Mhm.
scholarship was really a boost to my self-esteem, and put me in touch with kids who were older than I, which was really fitting for me because I usually related to kids that were older than I was, more than my peers. And so anyway, when we moved up here, then when I graduated high school, there was a small art college that had just opened up the year before in nearby Polsbo, just 15 minutes away, and called Northwest College of Art. And it was the perfect environment for me. It was just, literally, and it was mostly adult students. So again, it was a perfect segue into, and it was teaching commercial art.
Oh,
So it was
interesting.
much more focused on skill level, illustration, design, that kind of thing. It wasn't really a fine art school, but it was during that time while I was learning there that I began to acquire the skills that have set me up for life, really. Mhm.
How did you determine that pastels were your medium of choice?
Yeah, that always, I think when we find our medium, it's like finding your soulmate in another form, because it just comes naturally. And when you try them out, it's like, oh my gosh, where have these been all my life? It's like a love story.
I love
It
that. That's so funny because I've played with pastels and they are not my medium. I'm like, I look at your stuff, I'm like, I don't know how she makes these with
I
pastels,
know
but
most people say that about pastel. It's definitely its own thing, but it all came through horses. Like everything in my life has come through horses. So all the good things, especially, and so I tell this story in many forms in other interviews, but basically it was an epiphany that occurred to me when I was in the presence of horses, where I began sketching them in a different way than I ever had before, because they were at liberty. And it was the first time I had ever experienced that. When I look back, I realized all my time spent with horses was in a domestic setting with people controlling their actions or training them or riding them. So I'd never actually physically been in the presence of horses running at liberty. And that experience just fueled this creative fire in me, and became a life-changing moment when the sketches that I created were so unique and so different than anything I'd done before, that I knew something had shifted, and that there was something happening in my art that wasn't about my skill. It wasn't about um, how I could draw them realistically or get their personality, or it was about the spirit. It was definitely spirit on paper, and confirmed immediately by the woman, a dear friend of ours who owned the horses. And she immediately, when she saw them, and she was an artist herself, and her comment was, "Oh, that looks like Hala." And it was a scribble. You could barely tell it was a horse. And I was like, how does she know that?
was
So
that
that
when
was,
you had Fire Horse? Was that like,
yes, my
yes,
logo. Yeah.
yes, okay.
So that was the beginning of what I call spirit sketches. And that was the beginning of my understanding of how line and form, from an artistic perspective, you could say it was essentially sumi painting.
Mm.
I was taking the energy of what I felt rather than what I saw, because I couldn't draw horses in motion. I didn't know their anatomy. I didn't know it's a split-second image, and I don't have a photographic memory. So I had taken some training in what's called gesture drawing, and the gesture was in order to capture something, quickly. And so it looked like a horse enough to recognize it, but it was much more than that. And but mostly what I realized in looking back was that the experience of being in their presence infused the expression of the art onto the paper spontaneously. Like it went from experience to paper in a split second, rather than, say, a portrait painter, or a plein air painter who's doing a nature scene or something, where you're there for however long, painting a sunset or something. That they have to go fast for a sunset, because they have to capture the colors, but it's still, they've set it up, and they have their painting of the water or whatever, and then they add the sunset. This is more like, oh, that's it. That's all you have time for.
I love
And
that though. That's so
that's
cool.
that it felt like channeling. It felt like an intuitive expression on paper. And the more I tried to define that, because I knew something magical had happened, that's when I found pastel. Because when I came back to
Mm.
school for that after a summer break, spring break, my instructor happened to have a box of pastels sitting on his desk, and we had like a free day. And pastel wasn't something they taught in the school because it was a fine art medium.
Mm.
But I was like, I don't even know if I knew what they were. I just said, can I try those? And and immediately, because I had tried watercolor and I tried a couple things, but I was like, nothing is spontaneous enough. It doesn't have the same spontaneity. And the minute I tried pastel, it just had this ability. I've read since this artist had referred to it as he loves working in pastel because it feels like a natural extension of his fingers.
Mm.
And that's the way I feel about it. Like, it doesn't even have a brush. It's right from fingers to paper. And from an artistic standpoint, I just love the spontaneity of being able to pick the color, being able to go right to work, not having to mix the paints or do a template or have a palette or, and also not even the sort of realism of graphite or, kind of the medium you work in that has such an amazing depth and amount of detail that can be captured and so beautiful. But I love color, so it was a perfect mix for me.
That is so cool. I'm not successful with chalk pastel, but I've actually done oil pastels, and I
Hmm.
do something about the oil pastels I can do, but I haven't quite figured out the chalk pastels yet.
You'll have to
But
come over and play someday. We'll do
yeah.
an art tutoring session.
That's so cool. So you said it takes you about a month to do a painting, or painting slash drawing.
Hmm.
How large do you usually work? Like what size do you do various sizes, or do you do
About
like a
like the pieces
specific?
you see behind me are typically 24 by 30, 20 by
Oh,
26.
okay.
I can only go so small in the pastel because in fact, I can show you all what a pastel looks like.
Yeah.
Um, so they're called chalk. They're not actually chalk, but they're a dry medium. So I break them into pieces. Let's see. So each one is, small if I'm trying to get a sharp edge on it.
Uh-huh.
There's different sizes and different types. This one's skinnier and harder. They're different textures and different colors. So I have you can see my behind me. That's one of
Wow.
my pastel sets. So many, many colors, and it's like a big box of crayons.
I love it.
Yeah.
Um, so how many, you said it takes you about a month, like, so how many hours do you work on a painting a day? Like, do you feel like you have like a max, like, oh my God, I can't do more than this, or do you just get sucked in? Because sometimes I just get
Yeah.
sucked in.
I do have a max because I'm in a position where I'm like this
Yeah.
for hours. So and it's such when I'm doing a realistic piece anyway, it's much more, detail oriented. So I would say typically it's about 3 hours, sometimes four if I'm really on a roll.
Hmm.
And then my body goes, oh, okay, you know, and it's energetically too, because I'm not just physically. I do believe I'm energetically involved with the being. So it's a beautiful co-creation.
Do you meditate every time before you start, or do you have like a process before you, like for me, when I'm doing a portrait, sometimes I'm afraid to work on it when I know I'm not in a good pace in my, space in my head. I'll be like, oh, I can't work on
Right.
that right now because I don't want to mess it up. So
Yeah.
do you have like just a process to get yourself in the right headspace to do the work?
Yeah. If I'm in a place where I don't feel like I'm really especially when I was, dealing with challenges with the health of my horses or my husband going through cancer treatment, that kind of thing. I definitely didn't work a lot when my husband was in the hospital. And
Mhm.
obviously, there's those kind of life challenges. But I also, can find it really uplifting. So I let the art carry me if I can. And once, it's just like anything else, once you get involved in it, it allows you to escape and go into that intuitive place of flow. So I've always envied the artists that seem to be able to um like lose themselves in the art, and they'll, like not sleep, or the whatever. I'm always like, wow, I don't actually do that, like I don't get lost. And I'm not in that sort of passionate place. It's a very calming, steady, and embodied place, really. So in some ways, maybe I shouldn't envy those other artists, because it is a very holistic place that feeds me, as well as what I'm putting out in the creative process. So and maybe it's because I'm doing the horse, and that's the horse's nature. I hadn't really ever thought about it that way, but um, I do believe, because in my intuition, how I experience, getting back to your theme of your show, the intuition is how I experienced, as I said, the shamanic journey is that I'm embodying something um, in the journey. Usually, I'm both seeing things and I'm feeling things, and I'm often the actual being. So if
Mm.
I see an otter, sometimes I am the otter, and I'm
Wow.
trying to discover what I had this happen recently. I'm like, oh, am I an otter? I'm swimming, and here's my paws, and I'm swimming. Okay, so oh, actually, no, I'm a beaver, because, so I was trying to figure it out. And
Wow.
and so I also feel that that whole experience has taught me a lot of times that I believe horses have their own spirit guides. That's a whole other subject, but I've often depicted in my art, different guides that show up for the horse or for the person.
Mhm.
But I guess I wanted to express that when I do the art, I am the horse. I don't know how that happens, but I just know it. And I took a class in muscle testing, and working with the pendulum and muscle testing, and I learned how to muscle test with myself, so I can muscle test yes or no questions. And there's certain ways of asking it. There's certain ways of knowing that you're right, and that kind of thing. But basically, I do trust that. And once, after I'd learned that, I was doing a painting, and all of a sudden it occurred to me, because one of the tests in the muscle testing is asking yourself what your name is, like, to make sure that you're not off. So my name is Kim. Yes, that's a strong test. My name is Elizabeth. No, it's not a strong test. Okay, I'm testable right now. And one day I went, I wonder. So I tested, I am whatever the name of the horse was. And it was strong. And I was like, oh my, I knew it, but
That's
I was like,
fascinating.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I am the medium, right? I am
Yeah.
channeling that spirit. And mostly the exciting part is the people that love these horses tell me that's what I've done. Every single time they say, that is my horse. That's not a likeness of my horse. That's not how my horse looked or it looks. That is my horse on paper. And somehow I've tapped into that group consciousness, individual consciousness, and been able to translate it into, like that horse showed me in Horse Heaven. He said, um, the other part of his equation was not only that he said, you're giving me, you're reminding me who I was, but he said, you're actually, the pastels are like a physical manifestation of my spirit in the world again. So it's like a part of me is now in that.
Mm.
And again, I
Beautiful.
was so completely honored. And I'm not saying that I'm holy or that I have that sacred, I'm the only one. I'm just saying that that is possible. And I believe it, whether it's a stuffed animal that you love or a rock, stone, another being, a cat that he comes back and reincarnated. There's endless variety for that to manifest. And time and again, I've had synchronistic events where I see something or this or that's my horse or that's my friend or whatever, in the world, whether it's a living thing or inanimate object or a work of art.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. Gosh, that is so cool what he said about the you putting him in pastel and he's a part of that. Um,
Yeah. And
I
it's
I
the
know
horse that's doing it. It's not, again, it's not that I'm taking credit for it. That's my intent. And that is what I want to do and what I'm aiming for. And what my healing purpose is in the world is to connect people with that. And then the horse is along for the ride and they say, let me help you and I can do it for you. Then I get to, uh, channel that energy that they are manifesting.
I love that. I know you just listened to my episode you said with Shaylee, and Ugo was basically because I was so afraid about losing him. Like I haven't lost him yet, thank God, but he's the huge catalyst for me creating this whole My Magical Horse platform because he said that I need to get my love and my like how I feel about him out into my art. And I think it's even beyond the art because I think it's creating this whole entire platform is how expansive he is to me. And so yeah, I can just totally relate to that. Like they have a role in what's getting created, and it's such a beautiful, I don't even know, a beautiful way to keep their memory alive, really. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Even before, well, not only their memory, because you
he's
know,
still alive,
he's
but
still alive. And so his energy is expanding into this group that you're creating and this consciousness that you're creating and holding space for. And so he is that big. He
yeah,
is able, you are helping him manifest that majesty. And the horse is that way. That's why we have had them in our human cultures and we've looked up at them as sacred beings, but they've gotten lost in the shuffle of humanity for so long and relegated to a domestic form of entertainment. And there's so much more than that. That's what the Council of Horses is about.
that's so beautiful. Do you want
Mhm.
to I was gonna maybe share my screen if you wanted to talk about any of these. Well, first of all, so you do take portraits. Yeah, I mean, you
Mhm.
do portraits. I'm gonna share my screen. Hopefully I can figure out how to do this. Of Kim's website, and we're gonna look at some of the portraits that she's done, and if
And
there's any
actually,
that,
before you do that, I can
yeah.
share that one that I've got here in the studio.
Oh yeah, she. Oh
I was
yeah.
actually laughing because I thought, well, this is good that it's a membership only video because my client hasn't seen this yet, so I didn't want
Oh
to share
right.
it. But
Okay.
this is a work in progress, so this will give you an idea of how this all sort of unfolds, and then we can look at some more finished pieces.
And if people listening to this on the audio,
I'll describe them.
if you
Yeah,
want
there we
to
go.
watch the video, then you can join my magical horse.
Yeah, exactly. It's incentive, right? Okay, so this is the horse I'm painting. His name is Simon. He crossed over about a year ago, and this is a mock-up that I've created on my computer
Mm,
using the inspiration that came to me from him.
nice.
And it's a mountain in the background. It's the Rocky Mountains. She lives in Colorado. And this was an interesting concept because those of us who do intuitive work, obviously there's times where we go, am I getting this or why am I not connecting or whatever? And I wasn't sure in this case, even though I've done it as long as I have, there's times where I'm not quite sure. And I wasn't really receiving anything from him in a shamanic journey. However, when I was waking up in the morning, I was getting pictures and impressions. And the impression was of mountains, and so I followed that trail of breadcrumbs, and that led me to meeting a photographer on Facebook that had this beautiful picture of this mountain. And that inspired me because it had the feeling and the composition of like it was part horse, part mountain, like the mountains could be like him. So he's actually in this mock-up. You can see that my idea is a picture of him where he's superimposed over the mountain and the mist that's coming under the mountain. And part of him is see-through, so you can see the mountain through him, but his head and shoulders and neck are perfectly going to be depicted realistically so that you can really see his beauty. And so this is the work in progress of how I've come so far with it. And I've done all the backgrounds. So the mountain and the sky and the clouds are all really detailed and three-dimensional in the pastel. This piece is about 20 by 28. And pastel is amazing. I mean, you can see how it just glows. It has a light to it. And this is the beautiful sky. And I also, so halfway through this process, I woke up one morning and I had the impression of geese, like a flock of geese.
Oh, okay.
So then I went about finding a reference that I could use copyright free that was a flock of geese. So I'm actually going to be, you can't see them yet, but they're going to go here in the sunrise or sunset, I should say, is this. So this client was really cool. Sometimes I dialogue with my clients and we work on the concept and they like to see a sketch beforehand. She was trusting my intuition and she said right from the beginning, I don't actually need to know unless you need something clarified. She kind of wanted to be surprised and she knows this is my process. So she was trusting me to follow through with what my intuition told me about him. But I did want to get her permission about the mountain because I wasn't sure. She lives in Greeley, Colorado, and her, this mountain photo was taken in Longmont. And not having been to Colorado, I was like, are these the same? I mean, I know they're all the Rockies, but you know, is this peak of interest to you? And is this okay to have it be not in Greeley, Colorado, that what you might see? And she said, oh, absolutely. They're all the Rockies. But she said, actually, it's really, really perfect because I used to go to that area for horse shows. So it really reminds me of my horse. So
that's cool.
That must be why he was telling me that, right? So the beauty of that was once I got all the pieces of this puzzle and I was putting it together, and thinking I wasn't actually getting the intuition, kind of spelled out perfectly in the way my conscious mind wanted it to unfold. But I had all the elements, and then he showed up in the shamanic journey, and then I got the impression of what it all meant, and that was that he said that's when I was the beaver. The beaver took me to meet him in this beautiful little river where he was grazing. And I followed him. I followed then alongside him, walking with Simon. And I saw, he led me to like a parking lot. So I'm going to be really interested to see what she says after the fact, because I'm like, okay, this is like a gravel parking lot with a building. I'm like, and I said, so is she supposed to meet you here, or is this a place where you used to go, or why are you showing me this? And the mountains were in the distance, and just like we're looking at here in the painting, and the feel, I don't get words. It's more like just the full concept, and then I break it down into words. The concept was, that I had been thinking, is whatever the name of this peak is, I can't remember now, that's in Longmont. So does that connect with Greeley, Colorado, where she's an hour away, blah, blah, blah. He was like, none of that matters. The mountain is me, and I'm the mountain, and I'm also everywhere. So she can connect through the mountain, to me through the mountain. And it doesn't matter whether she can see the mountain or not, except in, like in the painting will help her. But but like the mountain is everywhere. Does that make sense? It was like the
Yeah.
feeling like we can be in a parking lot here looking at the mountain, but she can be in Greeley, Colorado and not looking at the mountain. We're still I'm still the mountain.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And then the second thought was, I said, oh, and what did the geese represent? Because I have my own interpretations about geese, or I could look them up in a book about totems, what do geese represent or whatever. But I was like, what did the geese, why did you show me geese? And he said, geese are divine messengers. And so whenever there is any message I need to convey to her, the geese will show up. Because
Wow.
the winged ones can appear. You know,
Yeah.
they don't have to you don't have to see the mountain. You can hear the geese or see the geese. So that was I never would have thought of that on my own. And so it was clearly from him. And I said, thank you so much. I really wanted to meet you before I painted you. And really I have, because I haven't started as part of the painting yet.
Yeah. Well, gosh, you're totally an animal communicator. It's so funny. Like,
I
you
guess I
listen
need
back
to
to this,
put,
you're gonna be like,
yeah.
oh, wow. That, yeah, I mean, it doesn't show up the same for everybody, but it doesn't mean you're not, I mean, there's all the different Claires and you're completely communicating with him. It's so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
all these different stories. It's really special. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, and then we're gonna look at some of your portraits that are on your website. And if anybody is watching and you're not a member of My Magical Horse, you can go to Kim's website, which is spiritofhorse.com. In her uh, portraits gallery is what we're gonna look at here. Hmm.
It's wonderful to be able to share this with the people. And I'll try to describe for those of you who are listening to the podcast, because my art is, Linda Kohanoff referred to it as romantic realism, which was really a lovely definition. She said, you know, it's realistic, but it's like it has a romance and a softness and an otherworldly aspect as well. So it's really I'm just so fortunate to have the gift of doing what I see in my mind's eye and being able to create it on paper.
Which one should I click on? Look at these. Look at the, oh, that's
Let's go with
beautiful
one
too.
being, just because it goes back to the idea of the spirit sketches, that so people can see that style of the you know what started as these sort of elusive drawings that were done really quickly. It's hard to see on. There we go. Yeah,
Mhm.
perfect. So what this is the commission was, a woman sent me, and you can even select that picture down below there. She sent me, it was a real challenge, because she sent me a picture, the next one over,
Yeah.
that was, there it is.
Oh,
It was a very
okay.
blurry photograph that you go, what the heck am I looking at? It's a picture of her doing like a horse clinic, and she's doing, say, like asking her horse to yield, and he's kind of walking around her, and it's very blurry, and you go, I don't even know what that is, and that's what I said to myself, like, how am I going to paint that
Right.
for a portrait? And she said, okay, so she said, what I want from you, because I know you can do this, is I want you to somehow convey this feeling in a work of art, because it's about me and him being one.
Mm.
And I looked at it and I went, oh, how am I going to do that? So there again comes in the intuitive piece. So if we go back to the art, I did a shamanic journey, and I asked her horse Skippy, who was living at that time, how do I paint what she wants me to convey about you and she being one? And in the vision, I saw them twirling around each other like a spinning cascade of energy. And in the twirling, there became no differentiation between what was human and what was horse, and they just joined. And I saw somehow that it could be that energy. I still didn't know how to paint it, but I knew what it felt like. And then I began, once I came out of the journey, I did I started some sketching. And as I did the drawing, I I and it was, I think there was also this native, oh, it remind no, I have to break it down. Okay.
Mhm.
After the journey, then there had been the feeling of dancing, her feet on the ground, and that reminded me of a shawl dance, which is a Native American dance. And the shawl dance is so beautiful. What I haven't attended one in person, but just to see it online was so fascinating because they dance in place, but their shawl is moving with these long fringes and feathers. And it just had this beautiful motion. So that was the feeling. And so I came up with the concept of a shawl dancer woman with the horse, but the shawl was prominent, like she was in the foreground dancing with the horse really behind her from the viewer's perspective. And it artistically, I was like, well, we can't see that the horse is dancing. And immediately the answer was no, the shawl is transparent, so you can see through her to the horse because they're one. And that was, so all these little dialogues and decisions go into each piece where it's like, how do I convey that feeling? Well, here's a few lines, and here's how you could do it, and here's the colors, and here's the leaves blowing in the wind, and here's the trees and the light. It's just, it's so fun and beautiful. And exactly, I did at the time also, I asked her, um, and she wanted this style. That was the other interesting thing, was she wanted this, what I call spirit sketch style, rather than a realistic portrait, which
Mhm.
was really suitable for this abstract concept that she wanted to convey. I made it his colors, just, because it does have, it does look like him, as you saw in the photo of his face. But with her, I'm not really adept at painting people. I can paint people if I have a really good photograph of them. But this almost felt like a past life. Like it felt like there's a universal concept here as well as her individual self. And so I asked her, is it okay if the human figure doesn't look like you? And she said yes. She does have white hair, but it looks like it's sort of a Native American, strong Native American influence in the face. And that's how that one evolved. So it was so much fun, and it was a real confirmation to me of um, how something can start out, even when I'm in my most doubting place, when I'm like, how the heck am I going to draw what she's wanting me to create? And that the horse tells us, the horse tells me how to do that.
That's so cool. And then did you write this poem? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm also a writer, so I do poetry and stories about most of my work. So my blog is really fun to read too.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
this. So
And
do they all have poems that go with
they
them?
do. So I started writing almost at the same time, probably, as soon as I could compose a poem, I started writing as a child too. And it was always about nature and animals usually. And so I discovered when I started showing my work that people in any given environment, when they're experiencing art, it really takes a lot to get them to slow down and experience something. So and I was inspired by the photographer Robert Vavra, who those of
Mhm.
us from my generation know about. He was an amazing equine inspired, the only sort of horse photographer in the world at that time, really, and did these incredible coffee table books. And he always paired his photographs with poetry, like from Shakespeare or Herman Melville, or some amazing authors. So I was really inspired by that because I wanted people to stop and slow down and feel this painting. And then I also started writing my own work, and so I've done a lot of writing over the years, and I'm really excited. The Council of Horses, I co-wrote it because I was really it's sort of my debut as a co-author, so I was really proud of that as well.
What was the biggest thing that happened to you when you're like, "Oh my gosh, I've really made it as an artist?"
Good question. Let's see.
Because your stuff
Well,
everywhere.
there's epiphanies and epiphanies. I would say, early in my career, in the very beginning, one of those moments was what I thought was that. But then, you know, what celebrity and turns out to be celebrity and isn't necessarily meaningful, but is a milestone. And what's
Mm-hmm.
actually meaningful are often two different things. But at the time, it was I was accepted into the American Academy of Equine Art, which was a big deal of, you know, my contemporaries and elders in particular that were professional equine artists. Robert Bobber always is in my head. He says, equine, it's pronounced equine.
Funny.
Yeah, I loved him. I love him too. As far as I know, he's still on the planet. But anyway, I was accepted into that early on, like 1989. I started in 1987, so I was 23 years old. And
Mm.
what was interesting was I did. It was a racing, you know, at the Racing Museum Hall of Fame, and so it was a real Kentucky kind of event with that kind of crowd. So I was focusing on doing racing art at that time, and but I'd been inspired by this one horse named Vaguely Noble, who was a stallion that I had not met, but I just saw his photograph, and the minute I saw him, I'm like, oh my God, I want to paint him. I got permission to use the photograph, and I did a portrait of him, and it was a head portrait. And they said in their prospectus, we do not accept head portraits. And so I'm like, I'm going to send it anyway. So I submitted that and two other pieces, and they accepted it. And I was probably the youngest artist that had ever submitted to the American Academy of Equine Art. And when I went to the event, it won first place drawing and popular vote.
Wow.
So I remember what that felt like. Like that was, I am at the pinnacle of this, you know, the gods are smiling on me. And I remember what it felt like to when my name was announced, and I was literally, I was like, I now know what they mean by cloud nine. Like when you're totally ungrounded and you're like, just completely like, wow, really me, you know? And
Uh-huh.
so that was a really big deal. It didn't have a career altering effect, but it was certainly, you know, for me to be considered a professional artist, like I was really walking the talk. And then I would say from a career altering perspective, from what continues to be the most profound thing that I ever did that has included the Council of Horses as sort of the next permutation would be
Mm-hmm.
having co-created The Way of the Horse with Linda Kohanov, because
Mm.
that card deck was everything I had believed and still believe about horse consciousness and how to get the word out about what it is and why we're touched by horses, even those of us who are not have horses in our lives. And it gave me that kind of leg up or notoriety, and I don't know if that's the right word, you know, being considered to be a part of that realm and being looked up to as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my, you know, astrological readings and everything I've ever looked into about who am I are always saying, you know, that's really what you come to do. And the horse is the vehicle for me to do that. Not the vehicle, but the co-creator. And I totally credit all the guidance that I've received as giving me the self-esteem to pursue it and to pursue my dreams. And I've been so fortunate and so blessed by having my path really paved for me in that regard, and having a measure of success that I can keep doing what I love. So it's a passion, and I'll do it as long as I can hold a pastel.
I love it. When did you change from, wasn't it Firehorse Studio before?
It was,
When did
yeah.
you
So
change to Spirit of Horse Gallery?
I think that was probably around 2000. My mom and I had been partners in our business, and the fire horse actually was because I was born the year of the fire horse in Chinese astrology, and I thought that, was just so exciting and fascinating because I didn't know about Chinese astrology until someone told me that. And I was like, they were like, well, no wonder you're making your mark at a young age. That's what fire horses do. And I'm like, what? What's that? And
Wow.
so it's a sign in the Chinese calendar that they have 12 animal signs, and every 60 years the animal signs revolve, so they become any given like exemplified aspect of that sign. And fire horse was in 1966. So I'll be coming up on the fire horse year, I think is next year, or
Mm.
yeah, next year. I'm turning 59 this year. So anyway, so the fire horse was, it just celebrated the fact that there was like meaning behind this work, that there was a big purpose. And but people in the real world don't really get into all that prophetic stuff. So they were like, oh, is it like the fire horse that pulls the fire truck? And I'm like, oh.
Oh gosh.
Or is it
Like
fine
how?
horse or fine hose? Or yeah, I'm like, oh, it's just not working. Okay. So then I renamed it. But also my mom became elderly and was no longer involved in the day-to-day operation of the business. So I thought I would rebrand essentially at that time and call it
Mm.
Spirit of Horse. So it was really clear
Mm.
this is what we're talking about.
I love it. And Fire Horse was really impactful to me. Like when I was younger, I just loved it. And it was that essence of, Fire Horse Studio or whatever. Was it studio? It was studio? Fire
Fire
Horse
Horse Gallery.
Gallery?
No, I think it was just the Fire Horse.
Just
Yeah.
the Fire Horse.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then when I came up with the name Golden Horse Studio, but there was an essence of remembering your fire horse when I came up
Nice.
with Golden Horse, and there's a lot more behind it, but I liked just the essence of that, like, because
Like
it
having
almost,
something beyond your name, like from the beginning, to me it felt like there's an entity, there is a presence beyond me. It's not about me, it's about the horse. So
yeah.
that's, it sounds like you had that similar kind of, there's a bigger picture here.
Yeah, the golden horse had specifically to do with two. One was a golden palomino and one was a golden buckskin that led into me choosing that name. But the essence of the fire horse rang in my mind when I came up with golden horse. So I just thought that was
Nice.
cool to share with you because you definitely influenced me and you had no idea. You had no idea. And here we
I
are
love that.
chatting. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a natural born teacher, like I said. So whenever I'm encountering young people at any event or whatever, I do meet people over the years that say, oh my gosh, I've known of your work since high school or whatever, or since
Yeah.
childhood. And
Yeah.
they often keep my work. Like I had a lady say the other day, oh, she said, I can spot a Kim McElroy anywhere. If there's some greeting cards or something that's Kim with other horse artists, she says, I can always tell. And I'm like, wow, that is so beautiful.
I can tell your work too. And yeah, I mean, I love you have so many different types of artwork that you do. But yeah, it was definitely that elements connect that elements series is what first put you in my mind, and I always just was fascinated by that. I was just like, wow, this is so cool. Like, who would have thought of that? Well, you did. But that's really cool. But do you want to, I don't know, do you have your Oracle deck with you?
I do.
You want to pull a card
I'd
for,
love that. Since the theme is about intuition, I think I would like to invite the Council of Horses, as I shuffle these cards,
okay.
to speak to our listeners, whoever they are on this call or this video or podcast, to give them sort of a beginning point where they can jump off from as to what how they can explore, and to give them permission to explore their intuition if they have hesitated, or how they can expand it if they're already experiencing that and learning that, or if they're already doing it as their life's work. And even the process of picking a card deck is intuitive. So that's one of the things that comes to mind when you were asking me what is an oracle deck. And so as we were talking about the idea of tangible matter being a reflection of energy, and that energy, one doesn't begin in the other end, like the woman and the horse, the card and the horse, the spirit and the horse. So these cards are horses. They just
Okay.
happen to be in a card form. And the
Okay. I love
Council of
that.
Horses it speaks through the cards. We were the medium, the vehicle for writing it and painting it, but these beings are living, breathing, sentient spirits, and so in some cases physical beings still on the planet, who inspired this dialogue. So, and just like any dialogue, you read it and you have your question, and the question, it's always nice to ask a question because it gives you the focus, the way of the best way you can get an answer is if you're really direct in the question. So the more focused you can be on the question, the more you can hone in on what part is relevant to you. You can just pick a card and say, what do I need to know today? But the more you learn to hone your question, it's like the art of intuition, right? When I go into a shamanic journey with a horse, I ask to meet them, but I'm also saying, how can you define for me what is your soul essence for the person who shares your life, or whatever that question is. So in this case, I'm also using my kinesthetic body language. And it would just be like walking out into a field and you see a herd of horses. Maybe one of them turns toward you and decides they're going to come visit you. Okay, that's easy. You know that you have a connection with that horse. But maybe there's one over in the corner that's actually kind of looking at you out of the corner of their eye, but they're actually inviting you to come to them, and you feel this pull towards them. So there's a somatic sense, like, I should walk up to that horse, even though this one's really friendly. This is the one I'm drawn to, or whatever that is. So that's kind of like picking a card. Like, a lot of people will spread the cards out on a table and they'll hover their hand over it and sense, which one, where does their hand want to stop. Sometimes they'll just look at the card and see which horse is asking them to come to greet them. And I have your answer. You can do it any which way, but we think of these cards as sentient, and they are just a jumping off point into that dialogue. So given that question, I picked the card which I was trying to look for earlier that I was going to show you. I love how that works. So it's going to be impossible for the viewers to see this on the screen, but this is a cloud of horses that I
Wind
was
horses.
describing earlier. And if you were able to see this, what you would see is sand dunes in an Arabian desert with 7 horses that are so hidden in the clouds that you really have to look at. You probably have to take a picture and zoom it in on your phone to see it, or look at it on my website, because they're part of the clouds so much so that you don't see them right off. But of course, the original, you have to remember, is quite large. This is a 3x5 card. But
Right.
there are 7 horses in this card. So I will read the card interpretation for this. And this is actually, there's kind of multi-interpretations of this, because the horses are called wind horses. And the catchphrase for the wind horses is invisible forces. So our question was, how can we access our intuition, and where would it be a place to begin to even know what that means, or what that wisdom holds for us? So the beautiful thing about the Council of Horses is we were guided to write the deck from the first person of the horse. So that's another way of looking at them as sentient beings, that they co-created, co-wrote this deck. And rather than about them, it's from them. So their guidance is about winds of change, clearing the air, and heaven sent. And then we received messages for humankind as a whole and horsekind as a whole. So people who have horses, the beautiful thing is they can engage with the Council of Horses for their own horses, with their own horses. The horses get their own messages as well as the human. And that's a really beautiful way to co-create and co-experience. So the message for the group consciousness of humankind is, sometimes you need to be strong and hold on to what's true, even when the winds of change are blowing through. The message for horse kind is, may you be like a willow in the wind and bend rather than break.
Wow.
And each essay has our story or the story of the horse. In this case, it's a group consciousness of horses. And then there's the council. So that's the council of horses is COUNCIL. And then there's also the word counsel, as in counseling, which is COUNSEL. So it's counsel. So our story, like the wind, we communicate without words. So that would be like spirit. We're asking, how does our intuition communicate? We communicate without words. You know us from the direction we hail and how we touch down in your day or your life. We can be fleeting and transient, gentle and permeable, or powerful and destructive. Most often, we remain invisible, but occasionally, if you look up on a cloudy and windy day, you'll see our impressions dancing across the sky. Indeed, the clouds you call mare's tails are not merely a portent of inclement weather, they are a foretoken of our presence. When earthly horses gallop about for no apparent reason, you know we are on high. Like the wind, our power can be harnessed, but we can never be tamed. The patterns for our energetic comings and goings create the foundation of order. However, be forewarned, we are not predictable. When chaos reigns, we become tempestuous, turbulent, and the form of a squall can bring much needed momentum. Like the wind, we carry and communicate prayers to where and by whom they can be seen, heard, and answered. Certain of your traditions recognize this and use our likeness to adorn prayer flags that stretch across doors and mountains. The Tibetan wind horse came to symbolize the human soul itself, for certainly the winds of heaven and earth have woven the textures of our stories together. But we are not just like the wind, we are of the wind. We are heaven's breath and our heaven sent. Counsel from wind horses. Each of your cultures defines wind horses a little differently, endowing us with characteristics that have special and local significance. The astonishing things about these perspectives is that they share common threads across time, converging in an artistic consensus loaded with meaning and with attributes of each wind horse being similarly defined. So I think how I would interpret that in this question is, like I was saying, that wind has a component that's similar across cultures across the planet Earth. But depending on how we use our intuition, what questions we're asking, what answers we receive, and what culture we're in, how we interpret a vision, a word, a symbol, any given thing, whether it's the wind or something that is tangible, is how we define intuition. Like everything has a message. Everything has a message. It's not just as we were saying earlier, it could be a stone, it could be, the wind, it could be a cloud. The Horses in the Element series was born of me seeing horses in a cloud formation. They showed that it wasn't just an idea, it was something I saw in nature that tapped into the archetypal reality of horses throughout time in cultures that believe that horses are made of wind. I didn't know that. I hadn't read a book on mythology to determine that horses were made of wind. Native Americans believe the horses are from the elements. That's all from cultural significance that we tap into as intuitives that we don't even know. We don't have a piece of paper. Now we have, the internet and AI and whatever, we can look stuff up. But back then, it was just a matter of trusting. So I think that's the answer to how I would explore intuition in the wind horses is trusting that you're being guided. The wind has always been a metaphor for finding your way when you're lost or when you have questions. And it's elusive and intangible. So you really have to trust it.
That's so beautiful. I actually had chills when you were
I did
reading
too.
the
I was like,
card.
woo, there's a lot of
Like,
energy
oh,
coming.
that's pretty cool that you were looking for it earlier and then it popped up.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope, yeah, people are interested that they check it out. Is there anything else you want to add, or you want to just tell people how they can find you, how they can find your work? Um, yeah, share. And I'll put everything in the show notes too.
Yeah, it's just been such a lovely conversation. I really appreciate the time and the ability to explore so many different avenues with your wonderful questions. And I guess I would just say, for anyone listening that feels drawn to connect, we were talking earlier about the fact that you've known about my art but haven't connected in all this time, and through a series of synchronistic events and meeting Kate Nelligan and then her leading me to you. It's just fun how that all unfolds. And 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 I know everything happens in perfect timing, so that's all perfect because your podcast is going to help share this horse energy out with the world. But please do feel free to contact me. You can tell I'm accessible. I'm a very uh you know, I love people, and I'm a Leo and a fire horse, so it really lights my fire actually to connect with people. And these days it's a little bit of a lonely process being an artist, even someone who's as well known as I am. I think people in general are in a space of um, they experience things, they take it in, and of course, in social media and the internet and everything is so fast and so much, and we're so saturated by imagery and experience and podcast, all of this amazing stuff that we want to embrace. It's so exciting, but it also can be overwhelming. So I really would like to invite people to connect and slow down, spend some time on my website. Just like I said before about how I used to write in order to slow people down. That was back in the 90s, when people weren't as operating as fast a frequency as they are now. But my art is really like, people will go to my website just to be able to experience that spirit of the horse so that they can tune in using my decks and things. So please reach out. Please, share with me how you experience it, because that's my soul food. That really fuels my creative fire.
Yeah, and like
And
I said, me reaching out to you when I did, it was such a like an intuitive thing. Like I didn't even think twice about it. It was like I was just like, I'm sending her a message and I'm gonna ask her. I'm pretty sure she believes in animal communication, or I wouldn't have seen her here. And I bet you she uses it in her art. So I'm gonna see if she can be on the podcast. And I just like boom, sent you a note, and then like you responded like fairly quickly, and I was like, and then all this just happened, and I'm like, wow, it's supposed to happen. And it was because the person who was supposed to be my guest, her horse had passed, and so I was like trying to figure out who I should schedule for the next interview, and then just like boom, like that, here you are.
yeah,
So cool how
wow.
that stuff happens.
I love that. Thank you. And I'm delighted to be here, and thank you all for joining us, because it's such a beautiful thing, because I get to have a wonderful conversation with you, reconnect with you from your time when we first met, and yet our conversation gets to ripple out and have the ripple effect of inspiring others, and that's just where I live.
So cool. Do you have
Yeah.
like one piece of advice for people just if they're trying to improve their connection with their horse, that if you had just one piece of advice, what would you tell people to do?
My actual piece of advice would be the best thing I ever learned, which is a technique that is taught by James French. He has the trust technique, and that was the best thing I ever did with my animals and horses, and uh, was the first time, and it happened late in my life. I wish I'd known it from the beginning. It's a meditative technique that you engage with in order to help your horse feel safer with you and safer in the environment, or your dog or your whatever
Mhm.
animal that's in your life, and people too. It's just life changing, and very affordable to learn, and very beautifully presented in a way that's easy to learn. So
Mm.
that was my key, because I can get into all these incredible realms of psychic phenomenon and creating spirit and art and doing what I do, but my everyday lived life with my horses in a physical body, when I had horses that were rescues and horses that needed a lot of support in their emotional and physical well-being, and often were challenged in that. Um, I would have loved to have had that resource way early on, because it helps get both of our nervous systems back into balance with that spiritual piece, so that we can actually, find the peace of mind and the space to experience that kind of intuitive experience in the body with the animal. And that is something that I know my horses have all crossed over now. So I sort of, I'm glad that I ran across it when I did, because it was absolutely essential for the recovery of my mare, who was very troubled in her elder years. But anyway, so that's my plug for James French. It's the best course I ever took, and I know will lead many people to the intuitive side as well, with beings in their life.
We can put that in the show notes, the link,
Yeah, yeah.
website. It would be great. And how do people find you if they want to learn about all your art and all the things that you've created? I know you have stuff everywhere.
Yeah, my it's kind of condensed down to my website now, because there's not as many companies producing my art as used to. But
Mm.
uh, a lot of people used to find my work through the wonderful Lean and Tree greeting cards. That was kind of my calling card, and I still
Yeah.
have a few cards with them. But yeah, my website is spiritofhorse.com. And that links to my shop, which is shop.spiritofhorse.com. And that's where all my prints and reproductions and merchandise are sold. And I also have an e-cards website. I think I sent you one of the e-cards.
Yeah.
They're little miniature movies that are animated with my art and poetry. And they're really lovely. And people really are such loyal fans of that. It's kind of it's a type of venue that was around in like 2008, 2010. Jackie Lawson was famous for coming out
Mhm.
with the e-cards, and I wanted to do that with my art, so I created that back then. But anyway, it gives you a way of sending a personal greeting to people with my art. And so that's spiritofhorsecards.com. But my
Okay.
website really is, there's a blog, and of course Facebook and Instagram. I also post almost daily on those. So always trying to inspire others with the spirit of the horse.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me. And this has just been, yeah, like a really cool, I'm like a little giddy, excited.
A fangirl. I've heard
Yeah,
that
I'm a
term
fangirl
recently.
right now. I'm like, guess who I'm going to interview on the podcast? And it's really
uh,
exciting. So thank you for coming. I really
It's
enjoyed
been
it.
so fun. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what I love.
What an awesome conversation that was with Kim McElroy. I am so grateful to have her as a guest. If you would like to watch the video version of this podcast, go to the Patreon and join us at www.patreon.com/mymagicalhorse. And if you join as a Phoenix Rising tier member, you will have access to all the video versions of the podcasts, and they are also pre-released 2 weeks early. We'd love to see you there. If you enjoy our podcast, please tell your friends, follow us, like, share, anything that you can do to bring us more listeners and more attention would be greatly appreciated. Until next time, namaste, friends.